John had always considered himself an average human. Nothing special ever happened to him. He was just a soldier, doing his job on distant planets for the Galactic Union. But today, everything was different. His mission? Investigate a new planet that had just joined the Union. He had no idea that stepping onto this planet would change his life forever. The planet was called Vorthos, a world of ancient ruins and towering buildings that seemed to touch the sky. The people here were not like any humans he had ever met. They were tall, with glowing skin and eyes that shimmered like stars. They had technology far beyond anything John had seen in the Galactic Union. But today, he wasn't here to admire their science or technology. Today, he was here to meet the leaders of the planet and observe their culture. Little did he know, he was about to find himself at the center of a galactic event. John walked through the grand halls of the royal palace, trying his best to act calm and professional. He was there to observe, not to make waves. His mission was simple: blend in, gather information, and return home. But as he entered one of the largest halls in the palace, everything changed. The room was filled with alien dignitaries, all of them standing in long rows, watching the center of the room with eager eyes. In the center, seated on a massive throne, was her, Queen Ilara, the ruler of Vorthos. John had heard rumors about the queen. She was said to be wise, powerful, and cold. No one had ever heard of her having a weakness, and no one dared to challenge her. Her reputation was terrifying. Even the bravest warriors in the galaxy respected her. But now, here she was, in front of him, and John couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and fear. His eyes widened as he looked at her. She was beautiful in a way he had never imagined. Her skin shimmered with a metallic hue, and her eyes glowed a soft violet. Her long hair flowed down her back like silk, and her presence seemed to command the entire room. She wasn't just a queen, she was a force of nature. Everyone around her seemed to hang on her every word, waiting for her commands. But what caught John's attention the most was the mysterious aura that surrounded her. She seemed untouchable. No one dared to speak without her permission. Every movement she made was deliberate, and every word she spoke was like a decree. This was a ruler who held the power of life and death over everyone in her kingdom. And yet, as John stood there staring at her from across the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As he took a few steps forward, he tried to remain calm, but the pressure of the room was overwhelming. His heart raced and he had trouble breathing. He had no idea what was happening, but it felt like the air itself was thick with tension. His thoughts were racing, trying to figure out how to handle this strange and dangerous situation. Was he supposed to bow? Should he introduce himself? Or was there some other ritual that he didn't know about? In the midst of his confusion, one of the alien officials in the room stepped forward. "The Queen will now accept your presence," the official said, his voice booming across the room. John nodded, trying to maintain his composure. But as he took another step forward, his foot caught on the edge of a rug and he stumbled. Before he could catch himself, his words spilled out in a panic. Will you marry me?" John blurted out, his face turning red. He had meant to say something more formal, something respectful, but his nerves had gotten the best of him. The room fell silent. John's heart skipped a beat as he realized what he had just said. It wasn't just a simple mistake. No, it was worse than that. It was a proposal, a marriage proposal, to the Queen. His face turned even redder as he tried to backtrack. I didn't mean to say that. He stammered. But his words were drowned out by a hushed murmur in the room. Everyone was looking at him in shock, and for a moment he thought he might pass out from embarrassment. How could he have said that? He was a soldier, not some court jester. He was supposed to be observing, not proposing to alien queens. And then, just as he thought he might never show his face again, the Queen's voice rang out across the room. "I accept," she said. John blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The Queen had just said yes. The room went dead silent. All eyes were now on him, waiting for his reaction. The shock on his face must have been clear, because the room began to murmur again, this time in disbelief. How could the Queen, the most powerful ruler in the galaxy, just accept an accidental proposal from a mere human? But there she was, sitting on her throne, staring at him with those glowing violet eyes, her lips curled into a small, mysterious smile. "I accept," she repeated, her voice soft but firm. John's mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. He had just proposed to the Queen of Orthos, and she had said yes. What did that mean? Was it a joke, a trap, or something else entirely? The entire room was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. And as John stood there, frozen, in shock, he knew one thing for sure: his life would never be the same again. John stood there frozen in disbelief. The room had erupted into murmurs, but all he could hear was the pounding of his own heart. The alien queen, ruler of Vorthos, the most powerful being he had ever encountered, had just accepted his proposal. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was a soldier, trained for combat and diplomacy, not this. The Queen's gaze never wavered from him, those violet eyes seemingly piercing through his soul. He wanted to say something, anything, to explain that it had been a mistake. But the words wouldn't come. The more he tried to speak, the more his mouth dried up, leaving him even more embarrassed than before. The silence in the room was suffocating. Every alien present, from high-ranking officials to lowly servants, was staring at him with wide eyes, as though they couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The shock was tangible. No one had ever dared to approach the Queen in such a way, let alone propose to her on accident. And yet here he was, standing in front of her, the proposal still hanging awkwardly in the air. The Queen, however, seemed unfazed. Her lips curled into a slight, knowing smile, and she gave a small, regal nod. "Good," she said simply. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying power in it that sent a shiver down John's spine. "You shall stay here under my protection and learn the ways of Vorthos. The marriage shall take place soon." John's mind reeled. Under her protection? Marriage? This was insane. He had no idea what he had just signed up for, but something told him it was far bigger than he could have ever imagined. His mission had just gone from simple observation to something far more complicated. You can't be serious," John stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean it. I don't even know your customs. I'm just a soldier. I don't know anything about ruling a planet or marrying a queen." The room fell silent again, the tension palpable. For a moment, John thought maybe the Queen would laugh or call him a fool, but instead she remained seated on her throne, her expression unreadable. "It doesn't matter if you know our customs or not," she said. "You've made your choice, and now you will live with it. You will marry me." Her words hit him like a thunderclap. He wanted to scream, to run away, but his feet felt as though they were rooted to the ground. How had it come to this? How had a simple, accidental slip of the tongue spiraled into a galactic event? The Queen wasn't joking, and there was no backing out now. The alien official who had announced the Queen's acceptance stepped forward. "You will be given quarters, food, and everything you need while you stay on Vorthos," he said in a booming voice. "It is expected that you will adapt to our ways, learn our language, and prepare for the ceremony. The Queen's word is law here. You will obey." John felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He wasn't sure if the alien official was threatening him or simply stating the facts, but either way, he knew he was in deep trouble. This was no longer a simple mission. This was real, and it was happening whether he wanted it to or not. Before he could respond, the Queen stood, and the room fell silent once again. Her presence commanded absolute attention. She walked toward him with grace, her steps measured and deliberate, as though every movement was part of a greater plan. As she reached him, she placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was light, but there was an undeniable weight to it. "You have no choice in this matter, human," she said softly, her eyes locking with his. "You will marry me because I choose you. The galaxy may not understand it, but it is not their place to question my decision. John's mind whirled. Marrying the Queen of Vorthos? It felt like the worst kind of nightmare. But the intensity in her eyes made it clear that this wasn't a request, it was a command. "Is there nothing I can do to change your mind?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. He was playing for time, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she would have a change of heart. The Queen's smile widened, but it wasn't kind. It was a smile that spoke of power, control, and something much darker. "No," she replied simply. "You will marry me, and you will learn what it means to be a part of the Vorthos royal family. If you resist, well, there are consequences. I'm sure you'll learn to accept them in time." John's stomach churned at the thought. What had he gotten himself into? This wasn't just about marrying an alien queen. This was about politics, power, and a future that he couldn't even begin to understand. The weight of her words settled heavily on him. There was no turning back now. As the Queen turned and began to walk away, she looked back at him one last time. Her expression was cold, but there was something else there, something like pity. "I suggest you prepare yourself, human," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "Your life is about to change forever." John's mind raced as he was escorted to his quarters. He had no idea what was happening, but the weight of the Queen's words was still hanging heavy in the air. "You will marry me," she had said. It sounded almost absurd in his head, but reality was far more terrifying. He was now a part of a world he couldn't understand, playing a game he wasn't prepared for. The hallways of the royal palace stretched before him, their smooth, metallic surfaces glistening in the dim light. The walls seemed to hum with an ancient energy, and every step he took echoed through the massive space. This wasn't just any palace, it was a symbol of the Queen's power, her absolute control over this world. And now, he was a part of it. He had hoped, in the back of his mind, that this might just be a misunderstanding, that maybe after a few days things would return to normal. But as the guards led him through the winding corridors to his new quarters, he realized how naive that hope had been. This was no mistake. The Queen's decision had been final. He was shown to a lavish room, far grander than anything he had ever seen. The walls were adorned with intricate alien symbols, and the furniture, though unfamiliar, seemed to radiate power and wealth. The bed was large enough to fit 3 men, and the windows overlooked a sprawling alien city. Outside, strange vehicles floated through the air, their lights casting a soft glow on the ground below. "Stay here," one of the guards said, before turning and leaving him alone in the room. For a moment, John stood there, staring out the window, trying to make sense of the madness that had become his life. He was supposed to be on a routine mission, just observing, but now he was in the heart of a galactic empire, bound by an accidental proposal to a queen who ruled with an iron fist. How had everything gone so wrong? But as much as he wanted to escape, as much as he wanted to deny the reality of it all, he knew there was no running away. Not anymore. The Queen had made her decision, and he was stuck in her world, whether he liked it or not. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts. He turned, his heart skipping a beat. Was it the Queen herself? Or perhaps one of her advisors? With a deep breath, he walked over to the door and opened it, only to be greeted by a woman. A servant, he assumed, given her simple attire. "His Majesty has requested your presence at the royal gardens," the woman said, bowing slightly. "You are to prepare for the day's events." John blinked in confusion. "The Queen wants to see me?" The servant nodded. "Indeed, please follow me." John hesitated for a moment, wondering what kind of events the Queen had in mind. But he had no choice. This wasn't a situation where he could refuse. He followed the servant through the halls, trying his best to remain calm even though his stomach twisted with anxiety. As they walked, the woman spoke softly, explaining the customs of Vorthos. The Queen, it seemed, was not just a political leader. She was a symbol of their entire way of life. Her rule was absolute, and her marriage was a significant event in the galaxy. It wasn't just about love, it was about power, influence, and unity among the stars. When they finally reached the royal gardens, John was struck by their beauty. Exotic plants that glowed in vibrant colors surrounded a large pool, and the air was thick with the scent of flowers he couldn't recognize. A fountain gurgled softly in the center, and strange creatures with shimmering scales darted around, adding to the surreal atmosphere. And there, standing in the middle of the garden, was the queen. She was dressed in an elaborate gown, her long hair flowing down her back like a cascade of stars. She looked every bit the ruler she was, a queen who could crush entire civilizations with a single word. "You're late," she said, her voice cool and commanding. I didn't know I was supposed to be here," John stammered. He felt small in front of her, like a child caught in a lie. This wasn't a conversation between equals. This was her world, and he was just a pawn. The queen gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "You are new to this world, I understand, but you will learn quickly." John stood before her, unsure of how to proceed. He didn't want to offend her, but he couldn't help the feeling that she was testing him. She was always testing him. Everything he did, every word he spoke seemed to have some hidden meaning, some deeper layer that he couldn't quite decipher. "I didn't come here to play your game," he said, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "I didn't mean any of this. I'm just trying to do my job." The queen's eyes narrowed, her violet gaze piercing him like a blade. "You were chosen, John, and now you are part of something far bigger than yourself. Your job, as you call it, no longer matters. You are here for a reason." John swallowed hard. He had no idea what she meant by that, but it was clear she wasn't going to let him go anytime soon. The weight of her words hung over him, like a storm cloud waiting to break. "I don't belong here," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. He wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. "You will belong here in time," the queen replied, her smile returning. It was a smile that made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to be pushed into the unknown. The moment stretched out, the tension between them palpable. John could feel it, the pull, the pressure of her presence. She was so powerful, so commanding. And he was nothing more than a pawn in her game. A pawn who had accidentally proposed to the Queen of Vorthos. The realization hit him harder than he expected. There was no escaping this. He had no choice but to play along. For better or worse, his fate was now tied to the Queen. And as she turned and walked away, John was left standing in the garden, his heart heavy with uncertainty. What had he gotten himself into? What was he about to face? As the days passed, John became more and more entrenched in the bizarre and dangerous world of Vorthos. His life, once simple and predictable, had now become a whirlwind of royal ceremonies, alien customs, and endless questions that had no answers. The Queen's presence lingered over every moment, and it seemed that nothing on this planet was as it appeared. John spent most of his days being educated on Vorthosian culture, its politics, its history, its etiquette. He was taught the language, the royal rituals, and how to behave in the presence of the Queen. Though he felt like an actor playing a role he could never master, every time he spoke to the Queen, he could feel her eyes on him, analyzing him, judging him. There were moments when he thought he saw a flicker of something darker, beneath her cold exterior, but it was always gone before he could fully comprehend it. But it was in the late hours of one evening, when the palace was bathed in the soft glow of distant stars, that John stumbled upon something that would change everything. He had always thought of the Queen as a figure of immense power, someone who was beyond reproach, but as he wandered through the palace one night, his thoughts a little foggy from the lessons of the day, he found himself in an unfamiliar part of the royal palace. It was quieter here, the air thicker with an unsettling tension. The hallway was dimly lit, the shadows seeming to stretch unnaturally against the walls. John's footsteps echoed in the silence, and he wondered why this part of the palace felt so off. He had been to every part of the palace during his stay, but this section seemed untouched by the light of day. His curiosity got the best of him, and he continued down the hallway, not quite sure what he was looking for. But deep down he felt something was about to be revealed to him. At the end of the hallway was a door, old and weathered, standing out against the sleek and polished aesthetic of the rest of the palace. It was slightly ajar, as though inviting him to enter. With a deep breath, John pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, save for the faint flicker of what appeared to be holographic projections hovering in the air. They looked like ancient texts, documents from a time long before the Queen had assumed power. The room smelled of dust and old metal, a stark contrast to the sterile, polished halls of the palace. In the center of the room, illuminated by a soft, eerie light, was a holographic display showing the Queen, but not the one John had seen every day. This version of her was different, older, more battle-worn, and standing in front of an army of Orthosian soldiers. Her expression was one of fierce determination, but there was a coldness in her eyes that sent a chill down John's spine. His gaze shifted as he scanned the documents that hovered in front of him. He recognized the language, but only bits, and pieces of it made sense. However, the images on the screen spoke volumes. They showed her, Queen Ilara, on the battlefield, leading her forces to conquer other worlds, to expand her empire. She was not just a queen. She was a warlord, a conqueror. John's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about marriage or power. The Queen's acceptance of his proposal, her calm demeanor, had all been part of something much larger. There was a political agenda hidden beneath her seemingly innocent invitation. She was building an empire, and John's accidental proposal had somehow tied him to that empire. He had become a pawn in a game he didn't understand, and the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined. Suddenly, the door creaked and John spun around, heart pounding. Standing in the doorway was the Queen herself. She had found him, and the look in her eyes told him that she knew exactly what he had discovered. "You shouldn't have come here," she said softly, her voice cold and calm. Her usual icy composure was now laced with something darker, something dangerous. The air in the room thickened, the tension palpable. John's mind raced, his throat dry. "What is all of this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his hands were shaking. "Why are you showing me this?" The Queen stepped into the room, her presence filling the space like a storm cloud. "You wanted to know the truth, didn't you? You wanted to understand why I accepted your proposal, why you're here. The truth is you are now part of something far bigger than yourself. You were chosen, John, not by accident." John took a step back. "Chosen? Chosen for what? I didn't ask for this. I didn't—" "You are here because I need you, human," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "You are a symbol, a tool to unite the galaxy under my rule. And I don't care whether you accept that or not. You will play your part." John felt his world shift beneath him. This was no longer a political marriage. This was a strategic move, one that could change the course of galactic history. He had been nothing more than a pawn in her plan. A pawn who had no choice but to follow her lead or face dire consequences. "But I never wanted this," John shouted, his voice rising. "I'm just a soldier, I'm not your pawn." The Queen's gaze hardened, her eyes flashing with an intensity he had never seen before. "You never wanted this," she said, her tone dripping with venom. "But you will learn to want it, John. You will learn to be a part of this empire, or you will be crushed beneath it." The room seemed to close in around him. John felt the weight of her words bearing down on him, suffocating him. He had been thrust into a war he didn't understand, tied to a queen who saw him as little more than a piece on a chessboard. And now, he had no way out. John stood frozen in the center of the dimly lit room, the weight of the Queen's words crushing down on him. The holographic display of her military conquests flickered behind him like an ancient memory, one that he had no place in. But there he was, standing at the heart of it all, a human soldier swept up in a galactic empire's dark ambitions. The truth had hit him hard, and now there was no turning back. The Queen's eyes never left him as she took slow, deliberate steps toward him, her voice cold and calculated. "You may think you're a pawn in my game, John, but you are more than that. You're the catalyst, the symbol. Through you, we will unite the galaxy under my rule, and your world will be forever changed." John's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't breathe. The walls of the room seemed to close in on him, suffocating him with the enormity of what the Queen was saying. This wasn't just a political marriage, it was a conquest, a dangerous play for control of the galaxy. And he was stuck right in the middle of it, bound by a promise he had never intended to make. "You've already made your choice," she continued, her voice a low, commanding whisper. "And you will marry me. You will stand by my side, not as a slave, but as my equal. Your world, your people will be given a chance to thrive under my rule, but it comes with a price." John's mind was spinning. He wanted to refuse, he wanted to run. But the Queen had a way of making him feel small, insignificant. His thoughts raced as he tried to gather his courage. "What price?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that spoke of power, of control, and of choices that had already been made for him. "The price, John, is your freedom. Your life will no longer belong to you. You will be mine, mind, body, and soul, and in return, you will help me reshape the galaxy." John's chest tightened. He had never been a man who enjoyed power struggles, who thrived in political games. But here he was, at the heart of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, with his fate in the hands of a ruler who saw him as nothing more than a tool. The Queen was right about one thing. He had already made his choice. The moment he had accidentally proposed to her, his life had changed. There was no going back, no simple escape. His world had collided with hers, and now he had to face the consequences. But what choice did he have now? The Queen had made it clear: refuse and he would be crushed. He would become an enemy of the Empire, and no one would survive the wrath of Vorthos. But if he accepted, he would lose himself. His life, his identity, his very purpose would be swallowed whole by her empire. I don't have a choice, do I?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The Queen's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "No, you don't," she replied, her words heavy with finality. "But you can choose how you play the game. Do you want to be a pawn, a tool, or do you want to stand by my side and shape the future of the galaxy?" John swallowed hard, his heart torn between fear and anger. He was no pawn. He had always been a soldier, a man of action, someone who fought for freedom. But now, freedom was a distant memory. He had become a part of something much larger than himself, something he didn't understand. But still, there was something within him, something deep inside that refused to accept defeat. Maybe he couldn't escape the Queen's grasp. Maybe he was trapped in this game, a mere player on her board. But that didn't mean he had to surrender completely. There had to be a way to turn the tide, to change the rules. If he was going to be part of her empire, he wasn't going to be another puppet. The Queen watched him closely, as if waiting for him to make his decision. Her eyes were unreadable, but John could feel the pressure building. She was testing him, pushing him to make a choice. He took a deep breath, his resolve strengthening. "I will stand by your side," he said, his voice steady now, filled with a quiet determination. "But not as a pawn. I will help you build this empire, but I will never be your tool. I am my own man, and I will always fight for my people, even if that means fighting you." The Queen's lips curled into a smile, but this time there was something else in her expression, a hint of respect. She had expected nothing less from him. He had been chosen, not for his submission, but for his strength. "Very well, John," she said, her voice low and almost approving. "Then we will work together. But remember, the path we walk is not an easy one. There will be sacrifices, losses, and betrayals along the way, and you will need to choose again and again where your loyalties lie." John nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his chest. The road ahead was unclear, and he had no idea what awaited him. But for the first time since his accidental proposal, he felt a flicker of hope. He might be trapped in a galactic power play, but he was still in control of one thing: his will. And he would not let the Queen or anyone take that away. As the Queen turned and walked away, her silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the palace lights, John couldn't shake the feeling that his decision had only just begun. The game had only started, and now he would have to play it, whether he liked it or not. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again.